With Dungeon Quest Reborn's massive rise in popularity over the past week as of recording, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go over each and every dungeon and sort of rate them, I guess. And in this video, we'll be going over Desert Temple, the first dungeon in Dungeon Quest. I'm going to be saying dungeon a lot in this video. Now, exactly how will I be rating these dungeons? Well, here's how I'll plan these out. Firstly, I'll just talk about them. The theme, the enemies, the bosses, all the good stuff. Essentially, everything you should already know about the dungeon, I'll just be, going over again. Secondly, I'll go over some of my personal opinions I have about the dungeon itself. What I think about it, what I like and or dislike, what I might change, any of my personal thoughts, stuff like that. Lastly, will just be my conclusion. Is it a good dungeon? What will my rating be? Well, I don't know. That's what we're here to find out. Now, obviously, I should start by saying I don't really hate any of the dungeons in this game. Obviously, I would put some dungeons over others, which would mean in the end there is one dungeon I would rank the lowest in my list. However, that still doesn't mean I hate it. It just means I like the other dungeons more. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about Desert Temple. Desert Temple, as you know, is the first dungeon players are able to access. Alongside Winter Outpost, it was one of two dungeons that were publicly accessible during the time of the game's public release. I can't talk. Taking place in a deserted temple based on the Egyptian times. What's most interesting about Desert Temple is that it's the only dungeon in the entire game that uses procedural generation rather than a linear map, which means each time you play through, you will almost always have a different layout each time. There are 6 different rooms that can generate, some being a straight path, while others have obstructions and dead ends. The only enemy you will ever be fighting is the Sand Peasant, which has the very unique and epic attack of walking up to you and hitting you. If that seems a little too easy, do not worry, as the Sand Giant is the big final boss of Desert Temple that has the crazy unique attack of also walking up to you. Oh, and the Fire Lines attack. Yeah, that's... 3 lines show up and you stand between them, or just walk around them. Yeah, if it's not obvious, the dungeon is stupidly easy. Being the first dungeon in the game, it's really hard to critique Desert Temple for its lack of unique enemies and bosses, as again, it is still the first dungeon in the game. However, knowing what every other dungeon has to offer, it would be easy for someone to say that this is easily the worst dungeon in the game. Going through it can feel very repetitive and boring, especially if you keep getting these super long rooms every single time. The map design is extremely lackluster in terms of decoration. There's not really much to look at, especially when it's your 23rd time going through the branching sides room. This room actually sucks. I wish it was deleted from the game, I'm not even gonna lie. However, despite its obvious flaws, this is the dungeon that gets people hooked to the game. It's very, very forgiving. Even on Insane and Nightmare difficulties, you usually won't have a problem getting through this on solo if you get the right gear. I mean, it's the OG map. Everyone started here, so it's kind of hard to dislike it. With all of that as my conclusion, if I were to be brutally honest, Desert Temple is the lowest ranking dungeon for me. I'm aware some people may disagree with that sentiment, but it really should have more to offer for being the first dungeon newer players go through. I can totally see a quarter half of some players getting bored before they even make it to Winter Outpost. I mean, the spawn of Desert Temple is essentially just a box. There's nothing here. Combined with the enemies being very bare bones and the decoration like I mentioned, it feels more to me like this was just a beta dungeon that I think the original developers decided to leave in to have more maps. It's always fun to go back to after dealing with the way higher difficulty dungeons sometimes, but even while being charming and nostalgic, it's clear that every dungeon after this one has a plethora of better mechanics and map design. And for that reason, Desert Temple sits at the bottom of my ranking for DQ dungeons. Finally, with all of that being said, going back to the title of the video, is Desert Temple a bad dungeon? Since it was the first dungeon to be created, it feels unfair to call it bad, so I'll just leave it like this. Desert Temple is mid.